that I had other interests, such as traveling, languages. I said, I will never ever draw a line or paint a painting. So, all until when I started feeling a bit of a bug there and the itchiness about going back to it. And it well coincided with my idea and need to move to another country to live, which I always wanted to. During that quest for my new land and homeland, so to say, I came to Australia. And it took me about 3 days to say, I can't believe this is it. This is all I ever wanted from a city, from a place. The book on my art, Icons and Art, Michael Galovic, was published in 2006. When I was 60, 12 years ago, I went to see one of the top art dealers in Sydney. I showed him the book with the aiming to exhibit my contemporary work with him. He said that the book was lovely, but the works didn't look that contemporary to him. And he said, but you are also too old. Since that time, I have produced my best works, and it was my most prolific period and productive period I ever had. Now it was my time to deal with my several projects that have been on the boil for years. My interest and love for angels have finally culminated in a body of work on angels through my icons. Probably with my mother, an art historian, and father, an archaeologist, and the stepfather who I grew up with, a painter and a restorer of icons and frescoes. I didn't have much of a choice but to study art myself, although I debated between art and journalism. My 5 years at the Academy of Applied Arts in Belgrade were an exciting segment. There, I learned to tackle my own creativity and to see how far I could potentially go, and also decide already then and there whether I would like to spend the rest of my life doing art or making art. As a diploma subject for the 5th year, I selected the theme of the flight and fall of Icarus. It is interesting how out of all myths, probably the Icarus myth is the most popular and was the most attractive for many an artist. And so it was for me in the 1970s, and it remained as well one of my favorite subjects. To this day, I keep revisiting the theme of Icarus. I recall daydreaming about other countries, other worlds, already at the age of 8 or 9 maybe. And in my high school, I was already obsessed about seeing exactly the whole world. So during my studies, I would be traveling around Europe, but it was not until I finished my studies and I was completely free that I decided to see remote countries that I haven't even heard before about. Coming to Australia, I remember how at the beginning people would be, if you mentioned icons or something like that, people would be politely shrugging shoulders and say, so what? Like, even if they knew what icons were about, they didn't know what would they do with it. Is it something to appreciate, to respect, to worship, to venerate, to put above the mantelpiece, or what? They are, what are they? Are they sacred art, or they are not sacred art? They thought they are basically just part of the Orthodox Christian culture, and that's where they belong. However, the Catholic Church at the beginning, or my beginnings in Australia, started showing signs of interest in icons, and not only the Church in Australia, but all over the world. Ave Maria, This exhibition was big and ambitious, but unfortunately, or so it seemed, it was greatly affected, commercially at least, by the event that we know by or as September 11.
going to invite you to listen to what they might have to say and engage your questions about their work, about what it means to them in terms of its technicality, but also what it means in terms of their own sense of spirituality and how their art relates to life. It's an inquisitive, curious set of questions.
I don't know when somebody asks me, did Australia or does Australia influence you? Does the light, different light influence you? Does this culture, different culture, can be seen in your work? Does it color your work? I don't know. I absolutely don't know. I can't judge, I can't be judge of that. But I know that if it permeates you, it becomes part of you. Definitely it has to be touched and tangential to your context where you're living. I absolutely could not find a job for a year, which was a very good thing as well, because I then, in my desperation, completely turned to making art, because it was the only thing I could do 24 hours a day.
What we see through our eyes, I believe, can cut through our analytical and critical tendencies, going straight to the heart, the spirit, the understanding. More and more, I'm trying now to share my presentation with other fellow artists who can contribute a lot to the experience of the event, not just reducing it to the visual viewing of what I have brought. So more and more I'm experimenting with these possibilities, trying to more like all-encompassing kind of artistic event.
There's a gap here and shows some of these most wonderful icons in art. I made the mistake of saying some of these paintings earlier.
I remember I got a phone call from a lady. She says, Michael, I heard about you. I just got a grant to make a documentary about migrants who have just settled here in Australia, who are artists and had a rough time. So tell me about your case. So over the phone I said, yes, you're right. The first year was really tough, and maybe I said a few things about that, and then started waxing lyrical, started being happy, saying, but it all kind of passed, thank God, I'm very fine now, and started talking about how great I feel now. She said, okay, I'll call you, she said, with some sort of hesitance in her voice. So she never called again, and I called her and said, what happened? She said, oh, what happened? Well, you don't qualify, you are too happy.
but just to formally welcome you and thank you very much for these beautiful, beautiful icons and everything else that comes with them.
So I experimented very much as I experiment all the time with textures, different materials. So I used the Hessian, very difficult texture to work with, a lot of gilding effects that I usually use. When we talk about constraints and regulations, if you like, guidelines of iconmaking, we always finish by thinking that the poor iconographers or whatever are only repeating some patterns and there is no leeway for any artisticness, creativity, demonstration of skills or whatever it is.
If Jesus ever loved a woman, I think Mary Magdalene was the woman that he loved. If Jesus ever loved a woman, it was Mary Magdalene.
Catholic and Orthodox, each piece of religious art is very carefully individually painted, and the artist himself, as he paints, sheet paints, also casts crayons, so they put very much of their soul and spirit into it. So Michael will be speaking in the conclusion of this Mass.
and your art and your creative talent, which you have brought to us this evening. Thank you for being with us.
It is my great pleasure this evening to acknowledge our wonderful artist, Mr. Michael Galovic.
I guess I learnt about Michael Galovic a few years ago, and it was probably through a friend of mine, and he commissioned an icon. I said, "Where did you get that?" And he said, "I commissioned it. I asked Michael Galovic to write it for me." And when I was at Redcliffe, down there in Brisbane, there was an empty wall. It was crying out for something very special. And when I came up here, I said, "Michael, I'm missing my lovely good shepherd. Can you do me one?" And he did. And it's here tonight. Thank you. Welcome, Michael.
During the Rockhampton show, we had visitors daily, and mainly the pupils, the students from local schools. It was so good and interesting to see how much the religious art resonates with such young people.
Diocesan schools and colleges are commissioning Michael's work for display throughout their schools.
It is in Hebrew, in the Jewish old language as well, Hebrew. It says, "Lord, Lord, why hast thou forsaken me?" Or "Why have you forsaken me?" So these are the last words of Christ on the cross.
It is more the fantastic mystical beauty of icons which talk to me, talk to many people, but talk to me sufficiently to make it a lifelong profession.
But an art exhibition actually is about what you can see. Not what you think in your brain, or not what your heart says. I mean, they're all very important. But what actually can you see with your eyes?
I have been dealing with the phenomenon, if I can call it like that, of ambiguity, and also a phenomenon of juxtaposition, if not confrontation, of different worlds. So here we have deliberately copied the icon of Saint Luke, painting otherwise in the original painting Holy Mary with Child Jesus. And then I wanted to juxtapose it in a way that he now stands in front of crucifixion himself, painting the crucifixion, yet the point of the story is that his rendition is different from what he sees. Paint, and the rest can be again the experiments, exploration, and expansion in gold. This is a Dutch gold, distress gold, and this is like a pure gold, but different golds. You see, red gold and 23 carats gold, subtle, very subtle differentiations. And just a few, like angels, like a few interventions with a little brush.
Es ora raznes gnatel, loga Very nice exhibition. I follow Michael's artwork a long time before. I followed him from a time from student time from Belgrade, from Academy Fine Art. He always did very good job.
Icons are even, for me, even not the sacred art, they are the sacred through art. So we do use art to express some theological situations that we want to convey. So there is a lot of art, there is a lot of craft, incredibly a lot of technicality there involved, but all in service of some other higher situations.
As we in Mitsubishi say, please consider.
Just say a few words about this exhibition. I guess I'm very grateful to the MacKillop Museum for taking the risk to put on this exhibition, because I think it continues the efforts to connect spirituality, people's faith, to contemporary experience. And I love these curious, strange people called artists who commit themselves to creating images. Because if we could say it with words, we wouldn't need such people who traffic in this difficult language of images which upset people and also seduce people. The great difficulty about art is its seductive quality, its alluring beauty. It takes us somewhere on a journey, sometimes where we don't want to go.
I didn't know much about Australia before coming here at all, and I certainly didn't know about Mary MacKillop. I learned about her and saw one of her photos just before she was beatified in 2002, I think, and from that point on I took an interest in her and started basically painting her in an iconic style, although she hasn't yet been canonized. And so most probably I was the first person in Australia to have come up with not one but 4 different versions of icons of Blessed Mary MacKillop, because she became blessed that year, and then later continued painting icons of Mary MacKillop that went all throughout Australia until the time she was canonized in 2010 and even further. The many icons of Mary MacKillop, now Saint Mary MacKillop, that I have done to this day, somehow did not tire me, did not put me off of painting more of the same saint. Especially perhaps because I now feel integrated, feel an integral part of this country, and Mary MacKillop is such an important element.
I remember meeting Michael not long after he came to Sydney, like some 20 years ago, so it's been a long friendship, and I went to Michael's place at Bondi, just behind the beach, where everybody else is heading for the beach in their cozies, and Michael was living this monastic existence inside this darkly lit small home unit with all these alchemical pots around making this stuff. It was a wonderful introduction to a man of great intensity, a great deal of quiet passion, who was working away at his craft. What a curious decision.
Mother Susan Aubert, who is the New Zealand first saint in waiting, as we would say, the New Zealand response to the Australian Mary MacKillop. Given that Susan Aubert, or Mother Aubert, hasn't been even beatified yet, let alone sanctified or canonized. The work that we would call an icon should be more like an artwork strongly based on icons or an iconic image of the saint to be. It cannot have an aura or a halo, and it cannot bear the inscription saint.
It's a real delight to welcome you to the opening of this wonderful exhibition of the work of Michael Galovic, icons and contemporary art.
One of the possible translations is, the pupil of my eye is the nest to your beauty. It was mostly a self-taught exercise because nobody in those years wanted to teach you or could teach you properly really icon painting. And it was such a hard nut that I broke my teeth immediately. But the challenge was so big that I basically said to myself, it is impossible that it can't be done. It has to be able to be done. It must be able to be done because they did it centuries ago.
Galovic, les icônes et quelques autres tableaux, et je crois que c'est bien la première fois que ça se passe ici à Nouméa. Et je suis heureux que cette exposition ait lieu ici dans la salle d'honneur.
Tu ressembles à tous ceux qui ont eu du chagrin, mais le chagrin des autres ne m'intéresse point, parce que les yeux des autres sont moins bleus que les tiens. Et comme tous les gens qui ont eu du chagrin, ton visage souvent a l'air dur et lointain.
It became obvious to me that an artist has to reach out, has to take his art to different audiences, different countries. And it was a total delight seeing how my art resonates in a country like New Caledonia, how much interaction there is between me and the audience.
On considère les icônes comme une peinture religieuse. Ça c'est vrai, mais même pourtant tout à fait différente que n'importe quelle peinture religieuse. Oui,
Interestingly enough, I did not manage to have the exhibition of my Uluru works here in Australia, as like an inaugural or a promotional one, but of all places it happened in Seoul, South Korea. The locals, Koreans, were very interested in seeing the exhibition because Uluru or Ayers Rock has a magic pool for especially Asian people. For Asian tourists, it is probably the attraction number one in Australia when they are visiting.
It's trying to engage the essence of Australia and its indigenous spirituality from the point of view of his own tradition as an Eastern iconographer. Now, Christian spirituality is centered on the human person, very much so in the Eastern tradition. Aboriginal spirituality is centered on the earth itself. The people are the people of the earth. It's the land itself that's of significance. And people are always seen in relation to the land.
Very nice to open this exhibition here at the Italian Cultural Institute, although the arts that are exhibit here has no relation with Italy directly, except for the religious context of the work.
So I started the setup of this exhibition as a homage to Italy. This is Saint Dominic as a replica of a Renaissance masterpiece, 10 of them, with Saint Sebastian again, the Renaissance-like style of painting, which are here to show you the difference between icons and religious painting. The exhibition in Ethiopia was organized by Father Angelo, who is also in charge of the Italian Catholic Mission in Ethiopia, and who is in a rank of a bishop there. He was also our kind host, and he took us down south to see more of this wonderful and interesting country.
Walaita. Walaita, Walaita. Walaita. Walaita, Walaita. 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 Walaita, Walaita.
Years ago it seemed as if my passions for travel and art had to be mutually exclusive. So it is thrilling now to see that they basically can come together and I can enjoy both of them at the same time. After 30 years of painting icons, this was the first time that I faced such a challenge. And not only that I haven't done painting of a dome before, but I had height phobia as well, a strong height phobia, and the whole thing happened during January in Sydney when it is exceedingly hot. So the scaffolding was moving, the leather was slightly shaking, and it was so hot that I was really being challenged every single day of this work. Today, when I watch the stills or the recording from the process of the dome painting, I really can't believe that I used at times so small, fine brushes for such a big work, because I have been used to doing that for 30 years and had no experience in dome painting at all. So I'm surprised that I have done it in the first place. The thing is that apart from the grueling conditions, the heat, the shaking or moving scaffolding, there was a wedding scheduled something like 2 weeks or fortnight after the beginning of the work. And also I was exhausted after 12 hours a day on it, and so I decided I really just have to finish the whole work within 2 weeks, which sounded completely improbable to everybody, and especially to my friend and assistant Gustav. But in the end, it was finished just under 2 weeks, which is just, again, even unbelievable for myself when I think about it today. In 1995, I got the first major commission from any church in Australia. It was the predominantly Lebanese community of the Melkite Greek Catholic Church, and for the Church of St. Elias in Guildford, Sydney. So I have made the whole iconostasis, painted the icons in the sanctuary and some on the walls, altogether around 30. There is also an interesting anecdote linked to this job and this church. It was reported a couple of years after finishing all the icons that the icon of Saint Stephen, the Archdeacon Saint Stephen, is bleeding or oozing. So there was a big dust around that, elevated around the event. The Greek Church of Saint Demetrius in Hamilton, Newcastle, commissioned me in the year 2000 4 big murals for their church hall. I really enjoyed this commission because this time it was not the expectable or expected religious work to be done, but murals depicting 4 major monuments or places of interest for Greeks. Well, this was the situation where I should have forgotten about small brushes, discard them and use bigger brushes, because these murals and these walls were quite large. The largest one, depicting Acropolis and Parthenon, was, let's say, 10 meters long. So there was no place and time for small brushes, although at times they would appear as well. We are in Campsie, a suburb of inner western suburb of Sydney, where our friend Father Chris Alexander has a house and a chapel in his own house. I was very fortunate and privileged to have painted a number of icons, I think 8 in total, for his chapel. Father Chris and myself, we go back a long time, maybe more than 15 years ago. I was running classes of icon painting in Sydney. Father Chris became one of my students and stayed as such for the next maybe 10 years, I think. And so we remained in touch, and then when he started works on his chapel just some years ago, a few years ago, he commissioned a few icons. That's how we started, and then the number increased, and as I said, it amounted to some maybe 8 in total, and many of them among my maybe best work. So I'm glad that it went to the place where they're very respected and well used, because they are basically not just the decoration of the chapel, but backup for the mass, and are seen by a number of devout people. So it's the best one can hope for his icons. One of the biggest and most exciting commissions I have ever gotten is the one for the St. Francis Xavier Church in Belmont. Big windows done in digiglass technique, and the brief was that the whole church, especially windows, is to be inspired by the book of the Apocalypse, and the work to be done in a way that we could see in, or we can see in the Gospels and Acts, the St. John's Bible, which combines the traditional and the new, which dances that wonderful ambiguous line between the classic and the modern traditional. Without knowing how my work is going to look like that magnified on a big scale, I knew that the work for the first time, original work, will be displayed in the church hall. Out of those 4 or 5 windows, one of them would be, let's say, 1.6 tons. It was agreed that each artwork had to be done on a panel or on a board, linen on it. That linen was bringing the texture into the whole scene, and that was very beneficial, or that is beneficial to the high size or high scale kind of window that we are going to have. There is a number of my works in St. Francis Xavier Church in Belmont. Possibly the most interesting one, for me at least, is the commission of the icon of the Good Shepherd. By the end of 2006, a book called Icons and Art, Michael Galovic, has been published. The only book on icons done by an Australian, combining also, apart from traditional icons, the contemporary religious and non-religious artwork. That book basically was showcasing or showcased my artistic activity in Australia in the last 16 years.
When the history of icon painting in Australia comes to be written, the work of Michael Galovic will be found to occupy a position of honour. It's one thing, for example, to paint an icon of an early Celtic saint. But another thing, a very different thing, for an Eastern iconographer to paint an icon of Mother Mary MacKillop. I think actually only an Orthodox can understand how difficult that is. Now, Michael has painted icons of things like Ayers Rock, and if you care to look behind you, you actually can see an icon of Ayers Rock. It is an icon. Well, for a start, it's painted according to traditional iconographic practices. But you might say, well, yes, but an icon is an icon of a person. Well, yes, in the Eastern tradition, certainly. Aboriginal spirituality is centred on the earth itself.
It has been awarded 10 national awards for the excellence in publishing, and remains as a very nice publication.
A very, very welcome to everybody to Mara Centre Sydney to launch this book.
The artist himself, Michael Galovic, and to Michael Green, in particular, who's contributed to the text of this collection. As the title suggests, it says something about a relationship that Michael has had with us Maras. It also speaks of another relationship, Michael's relationship with the divine.
When you get a chance, as you will, to have a look at the images, you will be startled by the brilliance of them, by the power of them. The relationship that we have had with Michael started in 1996 part of our bicentenary celebrations. And if you haven't seen them yet, you will see them up close in your communities. There's one that I commissioned myself when I was at Trinity Lismore, which is one of St Marcelin and Nano Nagel, the founder of the presentation system. And so I believe that what we have here in Michael's work and in Michael's words is a wonderful explanation and presentation of the invitation of God, and to officially launch this book, Galovic and the Marises.
Here in this place, new light is streaming. Now is the darkness vanished away. See the face of his and our dreaming, brought into you in the light of this day.
I try to tackle every new artwork as a unique one, as one-off. Icons are intentionally distorted, so everything is intentionally, deliberately made different, distorted. Because icons do not depict people the way they looked 2,000 years ago. The icon writer or iconographer tries to depict the person already sanctified, already transfigured, already belonging to another realm.
Do the job of talking to the people and reaching the people's hearts and minds.
You say, I am with you, always, even until the end of time.
We see Christ's loving face, may we be an icon of His grace.
I was commissioned 4 biggish pieces for a church yet to be built in Sydney. Those pieces were to be almost 2 meters tall and 1 meter wide, and they were to represent Marian main events such as the Annunciation, the Coronation of the Virgin, the Assumption, and the Immaculate Conception.
You certainly deserve it after investing so much of yourselves in the beautification of this house of God. Lord, may our prayer ascend as incense in your sight. As this building is filled with fragrance, so may your church fill the world with the fragrance of Christ.
I always wanted to paint the yellow Christ by Gauguin, but just trying to find a way about it and around it, not to paint exactly the way he did and only that. I took the Christian symbol of crucifixion and painted it in a manner suggestive of Aboriginal painting that looks powerful and looks also, for me, as a tribute to Aboriginal art. We are in front of the icon called Dodecaorton, or 12 feasts. It is the icon type of Christ in the middle, Christ Pantocrator, or from the resurrection or from descent into Hades, surrounded by 12 scenes from his life. This particular icon is very important to me personally, because it is not just the encapsulation of the core of Christianity, but also a summation of my 50 years iconographic practice.
Happy birthday, dear Michael. Happy birthday to you.
Pleasure to see you all here. That's my present. The basic dream of every artist is to have his own studio. In my case, it happened only at my age of 55, and I am still very happy about the fact that 10 years on I have my own studio. And in the garden, and it is a Mongolian, it is the timber version of the Mongolian yurt. Not particularly big, but big enough for me to work in and to have my works displayed in a dynamic way, because it changes, the setting is changing all the time as paintings come and go.
Salías del templo día llorona cuando pasar yo te vi. Salías del templo día llorona.
Michael from Australia.
No,
Orjo.
we are not Italian. We are from Australia.
She is
Yes.
Orjo.
Does it mean something, kombucha?
Yes, kombucha for me is good.
This rhythm is called koginikuku, used in some particular kind of shrines in my hometown, Abeokuta City.
The local belief is that it was angels who have built and carved all these magnificent temples in the rock. As for myself, I was quite happy with the haircut in Lalibela.